Everybody hates Meganium for some reason. Many consider this to be the worst starter Pokemon in the series. Competitively speaking, it's easy to see why. It's a very simple and unexciting Pokemon, with an average mono-grass typing, the ability Leaf Guard, which isn't very good, and incredibly average stats for a fully evolved starter too. Its move pool is nothing special, with many of the standard options most grass types in the game have access to, like Leech Seed and Synthesis. There are about 1 million other grass types with all of the same qualities Meganium has and more. But a lot of the disappointment towards Meganium and its simple nature seem to turn into vitriol towards the Pokemon itself. People just don't find this guy boring competitively, they hate its guts, inside and out. And I can't help but feel this is a little undeserved. Meganium's visual design is quite good in my opinion. It's a happy dinosaur character with a beautiful flower mane. Honestly, a lot of the early starter designs of the series are just as unexciting in terms of gameplay. Blastoise is another monotype with very average stats, outclassed by a plethora of other water types. Meganium and Blastoise have very similar stat distributions actually, but Blastoise is beloved, while Meganium is pointed and laughed at like a freak. Yes, Blastoise has a good and iconic visual design. Meganium is also very likable visually, I would say. People seem to have the automatic opinion that Meganium is the worst starter Pokemon across the franchise, but I would like to make the case today that this is not true. In some contexts, Meganium is not the worst, and it even has occasional unique qualities that do stand out from other grass types. I would say that competitively this is not necessarily the worst, and in terms of visual design and flavor, it is definitely not the worst. There are much worse. So allow me to make a case today for Pokemon's most overhated starter, Meganium. Consider checking out my petition with Makeship if you'd like to see an Iron Mugulus plush be brought into existence. Thank you. In Generation 2 Overused, the competitive format for Gen 2 where Meganium debuted, it is not the worst starter Pokemon in the game. In fact, Meganium is kind of decent. It's ranked in UUBL, which means it's in between OU and UU. And it's actually kind of viable. It's ranked 41 on the official OU viability rankings for Gen 2. It is above Typhlosion, who's ranked 52, and Blastoise and Feraligatr aren't even on here. Blastoise and Feraligatr are not even ranked. So Meganium is doing quite a bit better than some of its peers, despite what you might have heard about Meganium. The actual worst starter in Gen 2 is Feraligatr, who's all the way down in NUBL tier, followed by Blastoise, who is ranked in the UU tier. And these two are suffering from similar issues. As mono water types, they're getting outclassed by a lot of other water types in the game. Cloyster is the most popular, and Cloyster is much better than these two. Starmie is going to do Blastoise's job of being a water-type rapid spinner, and it's going to be way more effective at that. And what little advantages Blastoise has over Starmie are not noteworthy. Meganium, on the other hand, does actually stand out from some of its fellow grass types in the game, and there is a little bit of competition. Exeggutor is the most popular, an OU-ranked Pokemon with a pretty high usage in this format. It's a great offensive momentum generator with its Sleep Powder, Explosion, and hard-hitting Stab Psychic. But Exeggutor's more of an aggressive Pokemon. It doesn't have any healing moves, so Meganium is a little bit better on the defensive side of things, and it has a pretty nice defensive move pool. Synthesis is used to just simply heal. Leech Seed can apply a bit of pressure to enemies with chip damage and heal you back a little bit as well. Razor Leaf is the grass stab option of choice for its high PP and ability to be good in long-term 1v1s against enemies that are resting up or whatever. And you even have dual screens, Reflect and Light Screen, to assist your team with defensive boosts. Meganium can even run a Swords Dance set. Swords Dance is a great boosting move. You don't have much attack, but Swords Dance turns you into quite a bit of a threat, and you have Earthquake as physical coverage and Body Slam to spread paralysis against the common Earthquake switch-ins. Now you might be saying, Jimothy, what about Venusaur? Venusaur has all of these traits too. It has literally everything Meganium has. It has all of the moves you just listed, Razor Leaf, Reflect, Light Screen, Leaf Seed, Synthesis, and it has Sleep Powder. And arguably, you could say its typing is better. Well, folks, Meganium is actually set apart by its lack of a secondary typing here. Because Meganium is just a grass type, it crucially resists ground instead of being neutral to ground. It's a small difference, but it's a big one. Ground resistance is nice against common threats like Marowak. Snorlax commonly uses ground type coverage. And actually, it's kind of good against enemy psychic types, like Exeggutor that use Stab Psychic, because Venusaur is weak to Psychic because of its poison typing. But Meganium is neutral. And Meganium does have one small option one minuscule option that Venusaur does not have, and that is Counter. Counter is a move that has negative priority. You take a hit, and then you deal damage back to the enemy equal to double what you just took if it's a physical hit. And this is actually cool in Gen 2 because this works on Hidden Power. Because of a mechanical quirk in Gen 2, Hidden Power counts as a physical move according to Counter. Because Hidden Power starts as a normal type move. In pre-physical special split, all normal type moves were physical. So even though it changes type based on the IVs, the move Counter will work against Hidden Power because of this quirk. And this is useful because a common way to hit grass types is with Hidden Power S. Zapdos and Raikou use this, plenty of Pokemon use this to hit grass types. So Meganium operates a little bit better as a answer to the common Zapdos and Raikou because of this. It can catch them off guard, stomaching their HPIs pretty well and hitting them with unexpected counter-attack damage. Despite the propaganda you have heard, folks, when Meganium was first created in its debut game, it was a pretty good Pokemon. It's perfectly functional in the OU metagame. Back then, these stats were good enough. These are okay stats. We're also used to power creep. We look at this stat distribution and we think it's pathetic. But you look at other starters, they're all pretty similar at this time. Blastoise has similar stats. Feraligatr and Typhlosion have similar stats. They're all pretty low. So Meganium, functional Pokemon here, and it feels distinct to other grass types available in the format, which is very important. It gives it a little bit of use, and of course this is not a commonly seen Pokemon, but it's better than you probably would expect in Gen 2 OU. Unfortunately, folks, the very next generation, my whole point crumbles because Meganium is in fact the worst starter Pokemon in Generation 3. Every other starter Pokemon in this generation is actually pretty good. Meganium is the clear worst, ranked in the lower tier of RU. The distinct qualities it had over grass types last generation are feeling less important. Venusaur is feeling much better because Sleep feels more impactful. In a world where Sleep Talk is now nerfed, Sleep generates a lot more momentum. There's less Sleep counterplay inbuilt into the format, so not having Sleep Powder on Meganium feels like a bigger hit. That's half the reason you run Venusaur. And as a utility grass type, you are absolutely demolished by the new existence of Celebi in OU. Celebi did exist last gen, but it was Ubers ranked. Now Celebi is legal in OU, and this is devastating for many grass types because you would almost always rather just use Celebi. It has the much better Recover, which just directly heals and has way more PP than Synthesis. It also has Leech Seed. It has a million other options too, like Calm Mind, Swords Dance, Baton Pass, a lot of different coverage, a lot of different utility like Heal Bell, and many things really. Celebi is far superior. It even has the ability Natural Cure. Still though, this Pokemon is okay in the UU tier. Despite its lower ranking, it can work in UU, with its access to counter being one of the things that separates it from other grass types available. I would also say that it's a little bit funnier than its fellow starter Pokemon, and that has to count for something. That should count for something. In Gen 4 Meganium, yes, it is the worst starter in the game once again, but it's not by much, folks. It's a pretty close battle between three bad starters. Charizard, Typhlosion, and Meganium are all ranked NU, and Meganium is in the impressive B+ rank of NU. Let's go. That's pretty cool. We're above Politoed and Quagsire, so we have something going for Meganium here. Typhlosion is ranked in A-. That's just a little bit, that's only one tier above, okay? It's not that much. And then Charizard's in S-. It's pretty good. Charizard's quite a bit better, but Typhlosion is not that much better than Meganium. And Meganium got a slight buff. They gave it the move Aromatherapy for some utility. Can we get a round of applause? Aromatherapy cures your entire party of all status ailments. Venusaur does not get that. And because of your access to Aromatherapy, Counter, and Monograss typing, which provides a ground resistance, you are sometimes a better Pokemon than Venusaur on specific teams in Gen 4 UU. I want everybody to please give a rounding and roaring applause to Meganium for sometimes having some value in Gen 4 UU. I am personally extremely proud. Now in Gen 5, I'm just going to be upfront. This was not Meganium's fault. Because in Gen 5, many starter Pokemon, and many Pokemon in general, got new abilities from the Dream World. They got hidden abilities. This was their chance to give Meganium something cool, something distinct. And with many starter Pokemon, they achieved their most powerful states yet. Venusaur got Chlorophyll for double speed in the sun, an ability that eventually had to be banned from OU, because it was too powerful. Weather was permanent back then, so you could have permanent sun, and Venusaur was frightening. Blaziken got Speed Boost, turning it from an average mixed attacker into the strongest thing known to mankind. That was banned to Ubers as well. So some starters are ban-worthy now with new abilities. One ability can change everything. Blastoise got Rain Dish. It's not the best. Tentacruel is a bit better as a Rain Dish Pokemon with Rapid Spin, but still, a pretty good ability. What did Meganium get? Meganium got Leaf Guard. Leaf Guard is incredibly unexciting and so much worse than all of these other abilities listed here. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Meganium had a real shot at something. A good ability can make all the difference, but he didn't get one. You got Leaf Guard. Leaf Guard grants you a status immunity if Sunny Day is active. I mean, it sounds okay, but the bad part is that you can't use Rest while Sunny Day is active. One of the best parts about the ability Hydration, a similar counterpart ability, is that you can use Rest and be cured of the sleep, meaning Rest is basically a 100% healing move. If Leaf Guard just let you do that, just let you use Rest, maybe Meganium could be something. Maybe Meganium could be the reason you run a Sun team. But no, they had to add the little add-on addendum that says Rest won't work. I mean, it does just grant blanket status immunity, while Hydration cures status at the end of turn. It's a slightly different effect, but it's still disappointing. It still doesn't. Why didn't they just make this a mirror of Hydration? Meganium could have been so much better. But it's okay, I guess. Not really, but you know, what are you gonna do? Leaf Guard sounds alright. I mean, status immunity is always good, but it's just not enough to make up for how average Meganium is in other aspects, especially in the power-crept world of Gen 5. We've got Pokemon like Thundurus, Therian, and Keldeo, and Latios running around in OU. Meganium was good back in Gen 2 with these stats, but in Gen 5 it needs something more. It needs a little bit more to keep up, and it didn't receive it. Meganium is in the same tier as Ledian and Mothim and Wormadam Trash, and I hope that they're all having fun in Gen 5 ZU. They're probably better off there than in the higher tiers, okay? They're probably having good fun, and who cares about being good or bad, really? In a cosmic sense, who cares? Because when you have Wormadam Trash at your side, what worries do you have in the world? What is there to worry about? Nothing. And that's almost all there is to say about Meganium. In later generations, this Pokemon has received nothing. It has received nothing. An older Pokemon like this, it needs a bit of a push to stay relevant. There have been many cases. Dragonite got multi-scale. Alomomola got a bunch of stuff. They gave Torkoal Drought. Okay, they gave Meganium nothing, and they never will give it anything. They never will. In Gen 6, they released a new mechanic called Mega Evolutions, where Pokemon have powerful new forms. The Gen 3 and Gen 1 starters received fun Mega Evolutions, such as Mega Venusaur, an excellent Pokemon with thick fat. There's no Mega Meganium though. I'll tell you why. It's because they're afraid to have a Pokemon with Mega twice in a row in its name, even though that would be cool. They think that that's too many Megas. That's why they didn't do it for the Johto starters, because they would have to make Mega Meganium, and that just sounds too silly. But I think that they are cowards for this. I think that they should have made Mega Meganium. Give it a longer neck. That's one of their favorite plays in their playbook, is take a Pokemon and give it a longer neck. And they could do much the same with Meganium. But I think it's an important point to acknowledge that when this Pokemon was first brought into existence, it was functional and relatively distinct and pretty okay. And it wasn't that much worse than the other starters available. In fact, it was one of the more viable ones competitively. And you cannot expect a Pokemon that was fine in Gen 2 to maintain that level of viability without something given to it to keep up. Okay, it simply doesn't happen. You have to give it new stuff. Even Zapdos, the most consistent Pokemon of all time, OU in more generations than any Pokemon ever, has received pretty significant buffs in just about every generation. You know, access to U-Turn, Heat Wave, Roost, good new moveset options. They gave it Static. Without that, I don't know if it would have kept up as much as it has. And they gave it Defog for valuable utility. They gave it Hurricane recently. Zapdos has been getting a good treatment. As for visual design and flavor, I think that Meganium is a perfectly fine Pokemon. There's nothing wrong with it. It is nice looking. It's friendly looking. I think there are much worse starter Pokemon in this regard, in terms of visual design and flavor. My candidate for worst starter Pokemon in the game in that sense would be Inteleon. I know that this Pokemon has fans, and I apologize to you, but I think that this is a hideous creature. It's weird, I'm not even sure what exactly it's supposed to be. In terms of gameplay, it's also pretty boring. It's a mono water type. It's a special attacker. Its whole thing is that it has crit damage. It deals bonus damage with critical hits. That's simply not that exciting. It's not a very interesting idea. Compare it to Greninja or Empoleon or even Quaquaval recently. These are all more interesting Pokemon with more going on. They're a more complete package. Inteleon is just... He's holding his fingers like he's got a gun. It's too humanoid, but at the same time it looks a little bit uncanny. I think that if you showed somebody Pokemon for the first time, and the first guy they ever saw was Meganium, they would probably have a positive reaction to it. It's a fine creature design. If the first guy they ever saw was Inteleon, they might close the game forever and never return, honestly. They might get a bad first impression if they saw Inteleon first. Meganium is a Pokemon whose shortcomings are held against it in an unfair manner. It is judged harshly, for reasons that I believe have been unfair for too long. And I hope that I have convinced you today that this is not in fact the worst starter Pokemon. No matter what led lens you look at that question from. Competitively, in some small contexts, Meganium is not the worst. In terms of gameplay design, there are much worse. And in terms of visual design, there are also much worse. Okay, let's give Meganium some respect for the first time in history. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to Meganium for your years of service. Goodbye.